So I was already pretty much convinced of Trump's guilt in many of these cases that have been around him. Whether it was the case around him trying to overturn the results in the 2020 election, whether it was the case around his concealing of classified documents in his home, hiding it from the National Archives, and then having his staff hide it from investigators, cutting the camera feed, doing everything he can to stop the investigators from knowing he has these classified documents, no matter the National Archives, asking for them again and again and again. He openly lying to them, leading to the FBI raiding his home, which he would paint as political prosecution. I'm already convinced that this man was guilty in both of these cases. Now, that's not to say that I couldn't have been convinced if, some new evidence came to light or maybe something shown differently in trial. But the bare bones facts of the case for both of these matters were simple. And these were the case. And these aren't the only case. You can talk about the Stormy Daniel case, but I thought that was unimportant in comparison. And both of these cases, let me just throw out the series of events for you guys before we move on to the legalistic matter of the fact that Trump is never going to be held accountable to either of these things because he's been reelected president of the United States, and these cases are not going to be likely advancing anywhere. So the first one, we'll just start with the classified documents case. The classified documents case is simple. Donald Trump, while in office, increased the penalties for the mishandling of classified documents in order to make a point about Hillary Clinton and the email scandal. He then leaves office after increasing those penalties, knowing full well that he's been a constant critic of Hillary's mishandling of classified information, proceeds to take multiple classified documents, and when I say multiple, I mean many, which he did not declassify, which he did go through the process of declassifying other documents, and there is a formal process of declassification no matter what he says, and he did not go through it for many documents, took those documents anyway, put them in binders, and took them home to his resort in Mar-a-Lago, Florida, in storage conditions that we could just say would not meet the standards of, say, the Central Intelligence Agency or the KGB or somebody or any organization that would really want these things not to be found. And I don't know if it was always like that, or if it was after the National Archives got in contact with him and was like, hey, where are these missing documents? And he proceeded to say, oh, here they are, and then gave some of them back while keeping a lot of them, which then the National Archives asked about again, and then he just lied to them. And it was after that when he moved them. He got his staff to cut the cameras and move the documents around Mar-a-Lago because he didn't know if they knew where it was, which is when eventually the decision was made to raid the home and try to obtain the classified documents. And since then, we've gotten audio of him showing classified invasion plans of Iran to journalists who did not have clearance and just mishandling them in 10 ways all over the place. Not to mention, of course, its famous storage in the bathroom. So this is something where he is not only guilty, but you would say because of his increasing of the penalties while in office and knowing full well because he increased said penalties of the penalties of mishandling that he certainly should be held accountable to them. You cannot just make it a point of your campaign in 2015 that your opponent cannot be trusted to handle this information. She's untrustworthy and a liar, and then proceed to mishandle documents while lying about it, and then expect no retribution to come your way. So for me, I think that is a case that should have advanced, that should have proceeded forward. Now, the other case that I think should have advanced and should have proceeded forward, and now we're going to get over to the Jack Smith indictment, we're going to talk about is J6. Donald Trump made a big lie that the election was stolen. And he described that lie in many ways. He used many different theories he found online. He came up with probably quite a bit of it himself, but it was never substantiated. And he took it to court again and again and again and completely exasperated every legal option that he had until he then pursued non-legal options, which included pressuring the Vice President of the United States to overturn the election results in a purview that was completely unconstitutional to him, which the Vice President informed him, and the President continued to pressure him anyway, including with protesters outside of the Capitol on January 6th, which would then proceed to call for his execution due to his inability to actually overturn the election results and send it back down to the states. For 3 hours, he was informed of what was going on the Capitol steps, and he did nothing except watching it on the news. And if anything, at the start of it, he even egged them on a little bit. You could also probably mention, for good reason, I think this is important to mention, that his staff was calling people on the Hill while this rioting was going on, asking them to overturn the election results or to help him overturn the election results by sending the results back down to the states, which were majority controlled by Republican legislators, so they could decide the outcome of the election. So he wasn't moving to stop the violence, but his staff was moving in that 3-hour time period where the election results were delayed in its certification. It was moved on. What his staff was doing was trying to get people on his side so he could overturn the election results. And after the results were delayed, Trump told people to go home. So for me, this is something that warrants a look, to say the least. He made up the lie. He then pushed this lie on people, made them think that their country was under attack, was going to be occupied by an illegitimate government. And then after they shook the American people in a section of the American people that are, very let's just say hoorah about their freedom, and shook them into thinking their freedoms were possibly about to die on the steps of the Capitol, they took it seriously. And their actions matched that. And when they took action, Trump didn't. But his staff did. And what his staff did was try to take advantage. So this is something that I think, and now I'm hearing from Jack, from his report, that Jack thinks, in his report, that's about 120 to 130 pages, that the precedent that was set, or could be set, by this being unpunished, is too dangerous to not pursue the case, which is why he wanted to pursue the case, to strengthen our electoral institutions. Let's read a little bit about why the special counsel report that was written by Jack says that Donald Trump, he believes, would have been convicted, or he thinks could have been found convicted or could have been found guilty if this was put before a jury. Special counsel Jack Smith said his team stood up for the rule of law as it investigated President-elect Donald Trump's effort to overturn the results of the 2020 election, writing in a much-anticipated report released Tuesday that he stands fully behind his decision to bring criminal charges that he believes would have resulted in a conviction had voters not returned Trump to the White House. The thorough line of all of Mr. Trump's criminal efforts was deceit, knowingly false claims of election fraud. And the evidence shows that Mr. Trump used these lies as a weapon to defeat a federal government function foundational to the United States democratic process, which in the report he specifically names it as the peaceful transfer of power, which is an institution he wanted to defend. The report, arriving just days before Trump is to return to office, focuses fresh attention on the Republicans' frantic but failed effort to cling to power in 2020 after he lost to Democrat Joe Biden. With the prosecution foreclosed thanks to Trump's 2024 election victory, the document is expected to be the final Justice Department chronicle of a dark chapter in American history that threatened to disrupt the peaceful transfer of power, a bedrock of American democracy for centuries, and complements already released indictments and reports. Here is the 170, I said 130, 140, sorry, 174 pages of the report. This is AP. It has the report, and this is why I love AP, just embedded into it so you can just straight up download it. Thank you, Associated Press. You guys are awesome. Trump responded early Tuesday with a post on his Truth Social platform, claiming he was totally innocent and that the voters had spoken. Actually, before we get any deeper into this, let me show you Trump's reaction. This is from CBS News. This is their reading of his reaction. I wanted to show you this this Truth Social post.
In his report on Donald Trump's alleged 2020 election interference case, former special counsel Jack Smith says the president-elect would have been convicted if he was not reelected because they had enough evidence against him. Attorney General Merrick Garland released the 137-page report to the public around 1 a.m. Tuesday morning after a court order blocking its release expired. It began with a letter from Smith defending his prosecution of the former president. He wrote, quote, "The admissible evidence was sufficient to obtain and sustain a conviction at trial." The report went on to detail Trump's alleged efforts to subvert the transfer of power after the 2020 election by inciting the January 6th Capitol insurrection. It also adamantly rejected Trump's claims that the investigation was politically influenced by officials at the Justice Department. CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cortez joins us from West Palm Beach, where the president-elect is reacting to both the special counsel's report and Pete Hegseth's confirmation hearing. So, Nancy, how is the president-elect reacting to the release of the report?
Well, overnight when the report came out, Lindsay, he fired off a couple of comments on Truth Social. He called Jack Smith a lame-brain prosecutor, and he noted that the voters have spoken. What he means by that, of course, is the fact that the charges that are outlined in this 140-page report have now been dropped because he did win the race for the presidency in November, and there is a long-standing Department of Justice practice of not prosecuting sitting presidents. And
let me read this. Deranged Jack Smith was unable to successfully prosecute the political opponent of his boss, crooked Joe Biden. Now, there's a, you know what? Let me just read this like as if I'm talking to a normal person and not Donald Trump for once. Can we do that? Can we act like this was a normal person? Like let's say this was a new aspiring politician. We were trying to find out if this was like a person we should trust with any sort of influence about anything ever, right? To manage his local McDonald's, let alone the country, okay? Number one, what's with the random capitalizations? Political opponents is capitalized strangely. I don't know why. Secondly, Joe Biden was not special counsel Smith's boss. He wasn't. He did not get involved in the investigation in any manner. He did not appoint him. He was not his boss in any triangular system you want to put where he is involved there, outside of the fact that he is a citizen and Joe Biden is the president and therefore his commander in chief as his representative in the executive branch, as he is my representative, everyone else's. So just not true. So he ends up writing yet another report, don't know why report's capitalized, based on information that the Unselect Committee of Political Hacks and Thugs illegally destroyed and deleted, all capitalized, because it showed how totally innocent I was, not true, and how completely guilty Nancy Pelosi and others were, also not true. Jack is a lame brain. Is lame brain one word or two words? It doesn't matter. Prosecutor who was unable to get his case tried before the election. Election is strangely capitalized again. Also, what does that matter? Because it almost feels like Trump is bragging about what actually happened. Trump is not bragging about what he says happened there. It's almost as if he allowed him to show his hands a little bit here, because the way he described it was, I'm innocent and that's why nothing happened. I'm innocent. I've been vindicated. This is like me being exonerated, and that's how he's going to paint this going into the future. Trump is going to paint this every time it is mentioned as his exoneration. That's not true. The fact that the case cannot go forward is not based in any merits on the facts of the case in and of itself. It is based in the fact that Donald Trump won an election. So the fact that he is a criminal, a felon, or is guilty of even more unconvicted crimes is totally irrespective of completely separate.
Occurred is occurred.
To him, to him actually being convicted now, because as president, he can't be. But he seems to be openly bragging about the fact that, we got to delay it, which was his strategy. Donald Trump's legal strategy was never really that much on, well, see, this is why it's okay that we didn't have to declassify the document. It wasn't a lot of that. It was mostly, or trying to get the trial as quickly as possible to exonerate Trump. That was certainly not the case. It was the exact opposite, which was to delay, to make it so that the case would not be settled and as little information got out to the public as possible before the election date. Because then after he wins, because of the Supreme Court 6-3 decision, and let me just remind you guys, Donald Trump appointed 3 people to the Supreme Court. The President of the United States is immune while carrying out presidential duties, which has still yet to be clearly essentially defined. So it's still very blurry what exactly counts as carrying out presidential duties or not. But because he was able to delay it, and now he's bragging about it openly, like, oh, he's a bad prosecutor because he wasn't able to prosecute me fast enough. That's why I won. He's like bragging about the fact almost that he got out of it because he wasn't quick enough before he won and became immune. And it's almost like an open admission. Anyway.
And so while this
the voters have spoken, of course, all in capital letters.
Report is extremely detailed about all the evidence that Jack Smith was able to collect, interviewing some 150 people with grand juries for about 55 more. He said he had more than enough information to win a conviction when it comes to Trump's efforts to allegedly overturn the results of the 2020 election. He also went on to say that, of course, those charges have now been withdrawn, and Smith himself resigned from the job on Friday.
Nancy, we know that Trump was closely watching Capitol Hill today. Have you heard about what he and his supporters say to the hours-long questioning of Hegseth by lawmakers?
We don't need to know about Hegseth. We already talked about that. So, for me, this is the delaying tactic. The fact that that could succeed and the election was able to interfere with the carrying out of justice is extremely concerning, because it can basically leave a loophole for the President of the United States to abuse the law and leverage the office to do so once exiting office, as long as he can get in there for campaign season and get back into office. That bothers me quite a lot, and this loophole has to be closed. And during Biden's farewell speech, this was something that he actually commented on, that there had to be changes so that this loophole is closed. This is something that Smith actually brings up in his 179-page report. He says that there needs to be clearer guidelines on how to deal with these types of investigations in partisan election seasons, where any investigation into any candidate, of course, in this environment where the facts just don't fucking matter, it's going to be turned into a partisan ping pong ball instead of a serious investigation, as it was treated for the entirety of the campaign season. Hopefully, the efforts made by the team will make it easier for future investigators and future special counsels to try to get work done as fast as possible, and we can have some sort of resolution or solution to this election investigation problem, election case problem, election trial problem. There has to be a solution to it. I don't know if we're just what exactly that solution has to be, but there has to be a solution, because we cannot allow the presidents to abuse this system the way it is, and the way the Supreme Court, with a 3-vote majority, 3 judges being appointed by Donald Trump himself, this is too glaring of a mistake to let hold. I will say one last fact about this. Now, with the closing of the special counsel investigation and case, there's no more special counsel investigations going out at the Attorney General's office, which is the first time in, I believe, a decade or so that there hasn't been some special counsel investigating something. I don't know how long that'll last. I wouldn't be that surprised if Attorney General Pam Bondi immediately opened a special counsel report investigation into the dirty lying snakes in the media's manipulation of the American people or something. But something to note. The next Democrat president needs to do all sorts of illegal shit. I don't think that's smart. Let's not lean into violating the law.